G'day there guys, it's Connie here from Markey Industries again. I hope you're doing well. I'm back with the fluoro hat, and let's get right into the Reddit stories. Okay, well, on relationships, this one was written by user Hope Fuel Again, and it's titled, "My ex-wife still keeps trying to get back together with me, and our daughters want that to happen too." Doesn't really sound like a big problem, right? Yeah, well, while I wish I could just plain tell her to pee off and never bother me again, there is the matter of us having two daughters and sharing custody, so I can't excise her from my life on a permanent basis. Not without removing our daughters too. We married fairly early in our lives, back when we were 20, and we'd been dating for 3 years before that. Our daughters were born in the very first year of the marriage, and there were some complications which meant my ex-wife would have difficulty conceiving again. It didn't matter to me at the time because I was just glad she made it healthy and fine through the whole ordeal, and that we already had 2 beautiful baby girls to love and raise up. The marriage lasted for 9 years, ended when I divorced her for cheating. I have absolutely no tolerance for it, and I don't believe in forcing myself to suffer needlessly for crap that wasn't my fault to begin with. While this might sound incredulous to some folks, any love I had for my ex-wife was pretty much killed when I found out about her cheating and the details behind it. So yeah, this isn't a threat about me moving on from her. I've done that 7 years ago. Hell, I don't even hate her, I just don't give a damn about what goes on in her life unless it concerns our daughters. The problem is that it's only me that moved on from the whole thing. The ex-wife, her family, and even our daughters have kept trying to get us back together, even though I've made it plain for everyone that I have no interest of ever doing that. Me not dating at first for a few years after the divorce might have been giving them false hope, but I sure as frick wasn't going to jump into another relationship so soon after, not with their daughters to look after. They were my number one priority, besides my own issues which stemmed from the ex's cheating. Those issues, by the by, got resolved with the help of friends, family, and some counselling, so yeah, that's over and done with. I have no issue in communicating with their girls, none whatsoever. Anything else? They can understand it just fine. There's never been any fighting, no yelling, no nonsensical teenage rebellion, thus far, no tantrums thrown, and so on. Pretty great, right? Except this whole thing. They know about her cheating on me, and it was their mother in fact who told them about it, some 3 years ago or so. I imagine she's been feeding them some kind of bullcrap since then, and I've asked her countless times to stop with it, that it wasn't helping anyone, and that it only prevented them from moving on. But the ex-wife didn't stop. She apparently just got subtler about it. In all the years since we divorced, she hasn't dated or slept with anyone else. While I suppose she thinks that's admirable, I don't. To be honest, I find it kind of insulting. When we were married, she effed someone else, but now she's just fine going without sex for 7 years. Whatever, not that it matters. While I could ignore the occasional mentions of their mother, of how well she looks, of them showing me photos they took with her, obviously all dolled up for my sake, it's gotten worse lately. Why? Well, because I have a girlfriend. Clemens is not the first since the divorce, but she's the most serious relationship I had since my marriage ended. She also happens to be 8 years my junior. Before getting together as a couple, we knew each other for 4 years through a shared hobby. So basically, it was a gradual transition from being friends to being involved with each other. I can honestly say I love this woman. It was a surprise to me when I realized that, because while I didn't really want to admit it to myself, I was afraid for a time that what my ex-wife did to me damaged me on some fundamental level and rendered me incapable of ever truly loving someone else, like I once did her. Initially, my daughters had very little to say about our relationship, much like they didn't comment anything on the previous 2 I had post-divorce. But then they started coming home, ahead of the schedule we set up in advance, and they'd find me and Clemens together. Nothing promising, not sex or anything of the sort. Then came the grumbling. Then came the, "why is she here?" question. Then came, "it's not fair to Mum what you're doing," as if I was actually doing this solely to spite or hurt their mother. So I sat them down and talked, and I talked and I talked, but they're just not getting it. They simply won't give up on this preposterous fantasy of theirs where I get back with their mother. Clemens, thank God, has been understanding and isn't upset by their behaviour. She's basically saying to give them time, but I kinda doubt that will work. It hasn't so far, so I have no idea why more time would change anything. Anyway, since I'm really all out of ideas, I figured I might as well ask you folks here if any of you might have an idea how to handle this. Is there even a way, an approach of any sort that could work on my daughters realizing I will not under any circumstances get back with their mother? Oh geez, I don't know about this one. I feel like maybe it's gotten to a point where you really have to sit both of them down and explain in detail what your mother really did to you. Otherwise, yeah, I can't really think of any other thing to do. Let's go to the comments. Dude, I'm proud of you. You've done everything right. You just have one last thing to do. Don't let your ex push your buttons through your daughters. The way you do that is to not get emotional about it. Realize that yes, it may be hard at first for your daughters, but they will get over it. They're getting older, so they'll get a better perspective on everything. When they say stuff like it isn't fair to your ex, tell them you've always had no intention of getting back with your wife and you've made that plain to her. And that if you just keep saying that over and over, sooner or later they'll be forced to get it. If they keep bringing it up, tell them to drop it. They are insulting someone you care about, your new girl. If they respect you, they will respect her. Don't vary from this script. Broken record it. They'll give up eventually. Don't feel guilty or let your ex use your kids to guilt you. Just don't care. Quote, to be honest, I find it kind of insulting. When we were married, she banged someone else, but now she's just fine going without sex for 7 years. This is awesome, by the way. Oh crap, their mother is messing up their future relationships with boyfriends. They're being primed to think it's okay to have someone cheat on them if they hear apologies and declarations of love, or alternatively, that it's going to work for them if they cheat and try hard enough to get the original person back so they can get the original unchanged relationship back. I think this is the time to seek out family counselling with them, as well as having informal chats on how they should navigate their own potential relationships. They are integrating the wrong message from their mother into their view of, this is how you love. I know you said there was no teenage rebellion, but you might be dealing with their own form of it. They are poking at boundaries and being pissy when they don't get what they want. Opie answers some more comments. You need to chat with your daughters. You say that whilst your mother and you are good friends and have worked together to give your daughters a stable upbringing, there is no way in hell you're getting back together. You should say that if their mother thinks or says anything to the contrary, it's not going to happen. You say you like Clemence, and if things go the way you want them to, your future will be with her, not with their mother. Opie replies, I already did that, dozens of times. It just doesn't seem to be reaching them at all. At one point, that was about a year back, they asked me why I don't want to get back together with their mother. When I brought up her cheating, and I admit that at the time I wasn't sure if I should have done that, but I honestly couldn't think of anything else, it turns out that their mother had already told them about it several years back. They keep using the same approach every time of how she's faithful to me now. When I pointed out to them that she can't be faithful to me, given that we're not together to begin with, they just ignore that. I've talked with my ex-wife about this on numerous occasions, possibly 100 times by now, about not bringing our adult lives and messing up our daughters. In one ear and out the other, as they say. At one point, I admit, I even contemplated going to court for sole custody, but I was advised it would not work out well for me, so I dropped that approach. Another comment says, do your daughters know the reason why you're divorced? Do they know your ex cheated on you? I don't ever favour telling young kids that, but your daughters are nearly adults. It seems like they're labouring under some delusion about why the divorce happened, likely fed to them by their mother without your rebuttal. Perhaps setting the record straight on that regard might help. You don't have to be disrespectful about her. You can be factual and still get the point across. Opie replies, yes and yes. I actually tried telling them about it a year ago, only to find out that their mother told them several years back when they were just a few months shy of turning 13. They know their mother cheated on me. Now here's the thing that I think is messing with their minds. They never saw their mother as anything but loving towards me or them, or at least they don't remember it if they did see her acting coldly and distant with me. During her affair, and yes, it was an affair, not just a one-time thing, not that I wouldn't have divorced her either way, she was very much the opposite of loving in the bedroom. They never really saw that, nor should they have. My approaches for intimacy were often rebuffed, and I felt more and more dejected, until one day I realised, with the help of a very close and very good friend, that there was nothing wrong with me, and therefore something had to be wrong with her, which is what led me to discovering the affair, because I started looking for reasons why our love life had suddenly dropped so much in quality and quantity. And it wasn't just sex, there were the small things missing from our daily lives too. I know it sounds silly, but we always kissed at the front door, in plain sight, before either of us went to work. That's something that only now in retrospect became plain to see that was missing. Bottom line is, their mother denied me even the most basic of affections while giving it to someone else outside of our marriage. To me, that's unforgivable. They don't understand that. They couldn't, not even if I told them, which I rather wouldn't, and how hurtful it can be when you realize that your spouse didn't really give a damn about you all that much. So all this, all the regret and remorse and pining for us to get back together, to me, it's worthless. What's the point? Where was all this supposed love and guilt and remorse when it should have mattered? Yeah, spot on, and I feel like I can feel Opie's frustration through the way he's typing. It's just such a big betrayal, and it's obvious that the teenage girls don't understand this. Okay guys, let's go to an update. It's been a while since I was first here, and I was reminded recently that I owed an update to the kind and good people here who helped me with our troubles. A lot of things have happened. Among these things, my daughters actually stumbled across my post. I had no idea they even browsed Reddit, let alone this place. When I came home one day from work, I found them crying. They pretty much jumped me, hugged me, wouldn't let me go, and begged me to forgive them. Sadly, they'd read one of my replies and found out the dreadful extent of my ex-wife's affair and how much it had devastated me. It took us a while, but we got through it, as a family. There was nothing for me to forgive. They're still young and they love their mother, who took that love and used it to manipulate them. That's on her, not them. There was some much-needed counselling, but after several months, the woman who was helping us heal and move on has said nothing more needed to be done, and they should only check in with her once in a while, rather than continue their weekly sessions. We're closer than we were before, but their relationship with their mother has suffered for it, which I think is completely understandable, but I still cautioned them about lingering too much on what she did, since I'd gotten over what she did all those years ago. That was something also resolved in counselling, both their own and our shared ones, so it's all behind us now. I had a brief confrontation with my ex-wife about it, and made it clear that she was not to talk about this getting back together nonsense anymore with our daughters. I can't tell if it really got through to her, but my daughters have not been pestered about me since then. Or they simply ignore their mother and don't bring it up at home. Either way, as long as my daughters are doing fine, I couldn't care less about what my ex-wife is doing. Since the situation has improved, things had also become much better between my daughters and my girlfriend, so much that they actually started talking with her, rather than just exchanging terse greetings and goodbyes, even occasionally asking for tips on something, girly stuff of course, and I can't tell you how much it warmed my heart to see it happening for the first time. I'll admit that also helped me push my thoughts in the direction of proposing to my girlfriend, who had been incredibly supporting and understanding through all of this. We'd known each other for a long time now, spent so much time as a couple, and after all this mess, I didn't really think there was anything more I could do to express my love for her. However, I was beaten to the punch. 2 months ago, Clemence, together with my daughters, surprised me one day and proposed to me. I have to say that I felt very odd, but also very happy. Not just the proposal, but that my daughters had actually worked with my girlfriend on surprising me that day, with dinner and a night out. To put it simply, I was blown away. It was a small and private ceremony, with only our closest friends and family attending. Currently, we're also expecting, and my daughters are looking forward to having a baby brother or sister to spoil. Ah well, what a great update. About as good of an update as you'd want from that. And yeah, I know Opie wasn't even considering showing them the post, but thank God they found it. It's obvious that reading their dad's innermost thoughts and, seeing other people's opinions might have changed their perspective on the whole thing a little bit. Anyway, that's all from that story. Give me your thoughts down below and we'll move on to another one. Okay, we're over on relationship advice. This one was written by user Comfortable Egg and it's titled, I crushed my husband's feelings. What do I do? My husband decided to try out stand-up comedy at an open mic night. I was so excited because he's hilarious. I asked him if he wanted to practice with me, but he said no. He wanted it to be a surprise. So I finally got to watch him perform the other night. His delivery was great. He's got good stage presence and just getting up there at all takes a lot of courage. But his material, it was one extended dick joke. Some members of the audience loved it. They were in the minority. Most of the audience looked uncomfortable and slightly appalled. After his performance as we were walking home, he asked me, "Did you like it?" And I said I didn't like his material because it was basically one big dick joke. I then said that he had great stage presence and I think this could be the start of something awesome if he worked on his material. He got upset and said that I was a buzzkill. He said that everyone was laughing besides me, and I pointed out that they weren't, not even the majority of the crowd was. He's really upset with me. He says he was really nervous about doing it and was just proud of having done it, but I made him feel ashamed. He's unhappy now and says there's nothing I can do to fix it. I told him that I was sorry for being too critical. I've been performing since I was 5, and my mum never gave me praise, only constructive criticism, so I grew up thinking that caring about someone meant telling them how they could improve. I should have told him how proud I was first before I told him what I didn't like. He says I've ruined his debut performance and nothing will change that. Is there anything I can do? I told him I would work on being less critical, but he says it doesn't fix anything that already happened. Do I just have to accept he's going to be mad at me for the next however long? Nah, Opie's spot on. Constructive criticism is a lot more genuine than, just nodding your head, smiling and saying good job. As a performer myself as well, doing that is kind of like the ultimate insult, and you know exactly what people really mean when they smile and say good job after a performance. I don't think Opie really did anything wrong here. Yeah, maybe she should have said a few things first before she got into the criticism, but yeah, if it were me, I would want the criticism. But then again, Opie's husband is not a performer and doesn't do these kind of things regularly, so you can see how it might keep him up at night. Anyway, let's check out some comments. Here's some constructive criticism for you. Don't lead with what he did wrong and then follow it up with what he did well. Opie says, no, you're right. When I got criticism from my mum, there was never any what I did well, so I never really learned how to give good feedback to loved ones. And at my job, people appreciate my bluntness. I'm specifically sought out for feedback because I don't sugarcoat and just give it to people straight. But my husband is a kind and sensitive soul, and I love him so much. I feel horrible that I hurt him. This whole thing has made me step back and reflect on how I communicate with him. Here's another. You're a grown adult, you aren't at work, you're not your mother and didn't marry a child. Stop using your mother and job as an excuse. Accept accountability for your actions and words. Treat your husband as a husband. Opie says, I know I messed up, that's why I apologized. I provide that information for context, not as an excuse. I understand it doesn't justify my actions. Trying to understand why you are the way you are is not making excuses. It's introspection to try to understand why you did the thing you did. If I messed up at work because a process failed, I'd go back and examine the process to figure out what went wrong and learn from it. I wouldn't be excusing the error, I'd be fixing it. I can deal with people saying I was an a-hole. I was, even if unintentionally. I've also agreed multiple times that I messed up. My only point in bringing up my mother is that I realised that my idea of what support is was shaped by her, and her support wasn't actually support at all. Not an excuse, not a justification, just a realisation that there's an issue with my psyche that I'm responsible for fixing. Geez, the comments are being pretty harsh on OP here, I think. I feel like she acknowledged the fact that there was probably a better way to go about it already. Another comment says, best, most well-received constructive criticism means the sandwich method. A compliment, what could be done better, another compliment. I'm surprised you're so into the concept of constructive criticism but don't actually do it correctly. But also he kinda sucks too. You were the only one who didn't laugh. Sounds like he's willing to bend reality to make you the main villain of the story. Not much you can do about that. And if I were you, I would also correct that by pointing out most people didn't laugh. It may make him more hurt, but I'm not going to enable some alternative reality in which I was the bad guy just so he feels better. But you still should have done the sandwich. I would apologise for being harsh and give him time. But you already apologised, so I guess just give him time now. And in the future, take into account that sometimes people just want a pat on the back, not constructive criticism. Opie replies, I'm definitely the villain in his narrative right now. Partially deserved, but I don't think I'm as bad as he's making me out to be. I've ruined a stand-up for him and he never wants to perform again. But yeah, he was looking for a pat on the back and I don't do false praise. In hindsight though, when he asked if I liked it, I could have said, you have great stage presence, or I'm really proud you did it. It's been a learning opportunity for me and has caused me to think a lot about how I communicate with him, not just about this. You are like a gender swap of the husband who goes, oh shucks, when his wife who has gained 15 pounds asks if her new expensive dress she finds really beautiful makes her look fat, and he is honest and says he thinks it's awesome she's trying to improve her style, but yeah, she looks fat. Basically you're right, but you're an a-hole. Not a marriage-ending moment by any means, but maybe a sign that there's a part of your personality that is underdeveloped. People want to be told a fiction sometimes, in particular about their appearance, about their sexual prowess or masculinity or femininity, or in this case about their creative work. Sometimes, if you're not sure if someone wants support or suggestions on what could make it even better, the best thing to do is just give support first, then ask if they want tips and feedback. Now I'm interested to see how you receive feedback. Opie replies, "That's actually really insightful and helpful. I already knew we were gender swapped in most aspects. He's a stay-at-home parent and I'm the primary breadwinner. He's kind and nurturing. I'm cold and ambitious. He's creative, I'm analytical. We've actually discussed this issue before in regards to our child, because I don't want to be an emotionally unavailable mum, but I hadn't realised how my issues were already impacting communication with my husband until this incident." Yeah, I kind of agree with that comment about, people wanting to be told a fiction sometimes. But in regards to performance, you're standing up there in front of dozens, potentially hundreds of people sometimes. Like, wouldn't you want to know if you're embarrassing yourself or something like that? Like, I personally am of the thought that you're doing that person more of a disservice and being more insulting by not being honest to them. And honestly, if he was planning on doing stand-up again, he'd want to know how his jokes went and how the audience reacted to them. He'd be kidding himself if he said otherwise. Another comment says, "He's a stay-at-home dad? Oh, that makes it so much worse. He was trying to do something outside the home, something that might give him some identity other than your husband, and you crapped all over it. As a stay-at-home dad myself, that would be absolutely crushing. I'm not sure what you can do here, other than continue to be supportive and let time heal this." Opie says, "You're right. I really want him to keep doing it because I think he has a lot of potential, but I absolutely effed it up and I feel terrible about it. I didn't want to discourage him, I genuinely wanted to help him improve, but instead I made him lose motivation. I really don't know what to do. I hope that in time he does actually decide to go back to it." Another comment says, "He's never going to make it as a stand-up comedian if he can't take constructive criticism." Opie says, "I think he'll reach a point where he can take it. He's very open to critiques on his writing, but since it was his first time, he just wanted and needed encouragement." Opie's background. "I'm not an expert in stand-up comedy. I did do improv comedy for over a decade and sketch comedy for about the same amount of time, so I'm not a complete novice, but it is different. My analysis was that because it was an extended joke, basically different spins on the same joke, if people don't buy into that initial joke, you've lost them for the whole set. And when the initial joke is a dick joke and the crowd skews older, realistically you're going to lose quite a few people right from the start. I suggested, if he wants to keep it, coming up with variations on the dick joke or figuring out a way to incorporate other jokes into the set, but keep the dick joke as the running theme, just not the sole joke. I stand by my criticism. I don't stand by my delivery." Yeah, I think that last line's a pretty good summation of that all. Onto an update. "I gave my husband time and space like some of you suggested, and after a day he brought it up with me again. He said my criticism was fair and helpful, but telling him what I did when I did hurt him and took away from an otherwise great night. Essentially, it wasn't what I said, it was when I said it. I apologised again and told him that I hoped he would continue to do stand-up because it seemed like it made him happy, and that some people there found him really funny. We talked for a while after that about his set. I used the crap sandwich technique you all suggested, and he said he agreed with and appreciated the feedback. He's still hurt because what I did will always cloud the joy associated with his first stand-up experience, and he said he doesn't know if he wants me to come see him if he does it again, which I agreed was fair, although I hope he does eventually let me come. But overall, I think we're in a good place. We're going on a date this weekend and we're both really looking forward to it." As far as my mother, some of you seem to think I was using her criticism of me to excuse my behaviour. I wasn't. I was trying to explain that in my child brain, I interpreted my mum tearing me down as love, because how else do you rationalise that as a young child? And because that's how I learned to show love, that's what I did to my husband. People told me I should have been more supportive, but I thought that I was being supportive because that's how it was modelled for me. It's something I hadn't confronted until I was lying awake trying to figure out why I would hurt someone I love. Now that I know, I asked my husband if I'd been overly critical of him before. He said yes, but up until this point he'd shrugged it off and let it go. I told him to please call me out on it going forward. It might be the way I am right now, but it's not the way I want to be, especially for our child. Now that I've figured out the root of the problem, I feel like I have a better chance of changing myself. Others have said my husband doesn't have the mentality to succeed in comedy because of his reaction to my criticism. Maybe, maybe not. I think he would have been receptive to it if I'd waited until the excitement and post-performance high had worn off, and getting negative feedback from your spouse is different than a random stranger. Lastly, more than a couple of you suggested I give him a BJ so he gets over it. I'm not planning on using sex to replace communication in our marriage. I'm kinda surprised that works for anyone, to be honest. To everyone who replied, thanks for your input. I feel like I've learned a lot in the past 48 hours, and I'm slightly mortified that this has apparently been a thing my husband has been suffering in silence with for a while now. Hopefully this will help me be a better partner going forward. Yeah, all's well that ends well. Pretty good ending there. What are your thoughts about that one? Let me know in the comments. Anyway folks, we'll move on to another story. Okay, this one was posted on Am I the A-Hole? It was written by user Hot Wolverine, and it's titled, Am I the a-hole for kicking my son and his girlfriend out? Now I'm pretty sure I read this a few weeks ago, but there's a new update, so we'll read through really quickly for context and then obviously go to the new update. This situation has had me a bit confused, so one of my neighbours suggested I post it here. I, 55 female, have 2 children, George, 31 male, and Gabrielle, 29 female. Gabrielle recently got engaged and I'm helping her plan this wedding in my spare time, which the entire family is very excited for, except for George. George recently divorced his wife of 7 years, Susanna, 28, after he said the spark had gone out. They have a set of twins together, Amy and Alice, 6 female, and are trying to set up a healthy co-parenting relationship. Susanna is a great mother to my grandkids, and I was disappointed in George for giving up so fast on their relationship without even trying couples counselling, but it wasn't my business or place to say anything. The drama started when George brought his new girlfriend to dinner at my house. He met his girlfriend, Bethany, 25, through a work colleague, and they've been dating for 4 months. At dinner, Gabrielle and I were discussing flower arrangements, and Bethany felt the need to ask George if he'd ever marry again. George coughed before replying that he'd have to think about it, which Bethany seemed to deflate at. Well, this caused Alice to cry about how she wants Mummy and Daddy to love each other again. George and Bethany just sat there while my granddaughter screamed. After I comforted Alice, I pulled George aside and asked if he was sure about Bethany, which he told me was none of my business. I told him it was my business who he invited into my home and my grandchildren's lives, since I've been caring for them in my spare time while he works. He and Susanna have 50-50 custody. George got angry and said it was Gabrielle's fault for mentioning weddings in the first place. I told him to stop acting like a child and to be happy for his sister. Then Bethany felt the need to insert herself and tell me that she and George were together no matter how much I liked his ex-wife. After that, I was done with the conversation and asked them both to leave. George and Bethany stormed off, flipped me the bird, and left my grandchildren at my house at 7 p.m. I had to call Susanna to collect the children since they had school in the morning, and I was attending a cake tasting with Gabrielle the next day. I feel like I shouldn't have to tell my 31-year-old son to be happy for his sister or argue with a random woman whom I've never met before in my own home. So, am I the a-hole? Let's go to the comments. George needs to pay for daycare for a while. Opie says, the truth is George can't afford daycare with the child support and alimony he owes Susanna. I agreed to babysit my grandchildren as a favour to him. I love my grandkids, but I wish George would appreciate the thousands of dollars I'm saving him each month. Someone says, just quit watching them and he'll come crawling back. Well, I would if I thought he could afford it. We might disagree, but I don't want my son to be homeless. Maybe they need to rethink the custody agreement if he can't care for them. If Susanna took on more custody, then George would owe her more child support, which he's already struggling to afford. Plus it would mean that Susanna would have to work part-time hours, which isn't really an option in her industry. One comment says, Alice needs counselling. My husband and I have suggested that George pay for her to get some counselling, but he keeps saying that he needs to save and can't afford it. What exactly were you asking when you asked if he was sure about Bethany? I was asking if it was really the right time to introduce her to the family, since his daughters are still sensitive about the divorce and are trying to come to terms with it. I didn't ask him in the context of, is Bethany right for you? I meant it as in, are you sure this is the right time to introduce her? I didn't inherently dislike Bethany, but maybe it would have been better to introduce her to my grandkids after they've recovered from the divorce. Did George ask if he could bring Bethany beforehand? George asked me if Bethany could come 20 minutes before he was supposed to arrive, so it's not like I could say no at that point. Okay, onto an update. I didn't expect this post to gain so much attention, and I want to thank everyone who gave their honest opinions and helpful suggestions. This situation happened a few hours ago, and I thought it would be right to make an update. Bethany came to my house to apologise for how she acted at dinner last week. She told me that she was 2 months pregnant, and George had broken up with her after she told him, because he, quote, has too much responsibility and didn't want to be in the baby's life. I then spent the better part of 3 hours talking with Bethany about the baby and what she wants. She says she wants to keep the baby, even if George refuses to be in its life, and I told her that I would help with childcare if she needs it since she doesn't have any family that live nearby. Before I got angry with George, I thought I would call him and give him a chance to explain. George was angry that Bethany had shown up at my house and insisted that it wasn't his baby. I told him that he should get a paternity test, and he asked me for $500 to cover it since he's struggling. I told George that he needs to figure it out himself since he's about to be a father of 3, and that he better step up and do right by his kids. George then hung up. Well, 2 hours later, I get a call from Susanna to say that George hadn't picked up the kids like he'd previously agreed to, and could she drop them at my place because she had work. I agreed for her to drop Amy and Alice off and tried to call George again. I called 12 times, and they all went to voice message. I don't know where George is, and I've called his place of employment to try and find out. However, they refused to tell me anything. I've agreed to watch Amy and Alice until Wednesday, and Susanna has reported this incident to CPS. I assume she plans to file for full custody, and I can't blame her. Right now, I'm worried that George has run off somewhere, or done something irresponsible. I am disgusted and will not be doing him any favours in the future unless he has a very good explanation and accepts some responsibility. This was hard to write, but felt good to get off my chest. Thank you everyone for responding to my first post. One comment says, "Hey OP, you're disappointed in your son for giving up on his marriage so easily, and I'll bet dollars to donuts that you and your daughter-in-law have been telling the twins that mummy and daddy are getting back together. I bet you asked your granddaughter to say something like that to, quote, help daddy realize that it would make everyone happy. You need to butt out of your children's personal lives and get a damn hobby." OP replies, "You owe me quite a few donuts then since you're dead wrong. I'll poke my nose in my son's business when he's being an irresponsible parent and not taking accountability for his children. Bethany is pregnant. It's his time to have the twins, and he's nowhere to be found. It just proves to me I should have made his personal life even more of my business." Someone says, "Alice caused drama and you exacerbated it by asking about Bethany." Alice is 6 years old. She hardly meant to cause drama, as you put it. She's a 6-year-old little girl who doesn't understand why her parents no longer live together. I never asked George if he was sure about Bethany in the context of is she the one. I meant it in the context of is he sure he's making the right choice to introduce her to the family so soon, since his own daughter clearly isn't ready to think of her dad marrying someone else yet. I don't care who George ends up dating, but he has children to think about, and my granddaughters need to come before any random woman he's been seeing for 4 months. Yeah, hard to argue with OP on that front. I don't know why so many comments are insisting on putting her in the wrong. On to the next update. Okay, so I made the original post about 2 months ago, and since then things have been a bit crazy lately, so I just wanted to update as I had people asking if George was okay. In my first post, people suggested I give George some space and time to figure things out as a recently divorced father, but after he ran off around 2 months ago, I ended up filing a missing persons report. I talked to George's workplace the day after I filed the report, and they told me he'd given his 2 weeks about a month ago. I then tried calling George again, and he finally picked up. He told me he was okay, but he had moved states and no longer wanted any contact with his children because it was all too much responsibility for him. I snapped at George and told him he couldn't just decide now he didn't want to be a father. Then George told me he never wanted kids in the first place and, quote, "those kids don't look anything like me anyway." George then told me to F off and hung up the call. After that, I informed the police department what had happened to let them know George wasn't in any danger and that we knew his whereabouts. After that happened, I just cried because I couldn't believe I'd raised such a selfish person. Susanna has filed for full custody, and George, as far as I know, is refusing to pay child support and will probably end up in jail at some point. Bethany is now 4 months pregnant and is having a boy, and George is the father. Somehow he managed to come up with the $500, so he will have to pay child support, since he doesn't plan on being in the baby's life. Bethany moved into my home in November since she's had trouble doing things herself, and her doctor says she's at risk of preeclampsia if she becomes too stressed during the pregnancy. In that time we've gotten closer, and despite how our first meeting went, I've actually come to like Bethany. Sorry this isn't the happy ending some of you were expecting. I've been following the advice I received from the first post and have not contacted George, and he has not tried to contact me. I can only hope with time he pulls himself together and manages to step up as a father. Again, thank you to everyone who gave helpful advice. I'm not sure if I'll be updating further, however. Yeah, George sounds like a right prick, and I wouldn't be waiting on him, stepping up and becoming a father anytime soon. One comment says, I guess we can only hope George steps up. I'm sorry. Opie says, thank you. It's been hard for our family to cope with George being so irresponsible, and I've been in and out of the hospital for the past 2 weeks due to the stress of the whole situation. I hope George steps up, though he hasn't even sent Christmas gifts for his children. Another comment says, definitely worth looking into therapy for yourself and the family. My husband and I are looking into funding some family therapy and individual therapy for the twins, but we're waiting to see if our health insurance will cover it. Why did Bethany want to keep this pregnancy? Well, Bethany is convinced that George will change his mind once the baby is born, which I've tried to tell her probably won't be the case, but Bethany is convinced he will, and no one can tell her otherwise. Yeah, well, let's see about that, shall we? On to a new update, 6 months later. Hi Reddit, it's been over 6 months since my last update after I completely forgot about this account. Much has happened in that amount of time, so as requested, here's the update. Well, first of all, Gabrielle is now married to her amazing fiancé, and I couldn't be more proud. The wedding was a small family affair at his parents' farm. George did not attend the wedding, but it was a beautiful ceremony all the same. Bethany has given birth to a healthy baby boy and has found an apartment and a new job. I'm so proud of her for how well she is coping with everything. As suggested in my last post, we did get the twins therapy, and it's helped them heal throughout this whole process. After George took off and abandoned his children, our whole family needed time to heal and recover from the hurt and trauma. As for George, that's a messy situation. Roughly 4 months ago, George was found to be in possession of illegal substances and was arrested. When George first called me from the county jail, I thought he was trying to get money out of my husband and I. However, it just got worse and worse. He asked me to pay for a lawyer, and I explained that because of his actions I couldn't afford to help him and that I couldn't trust him. George just sobbed and started apologizing for all he had done. I told him it was his kids he should be apologizing to. He kept sobbing and then told me there was another woman pregnant with his child. At first I didn't believe him, but then he gave details and I looked her up on Facebook. There was a picture of them as the profile picture. I hung up on him, disgusted yet still feeling somewhat responsible for what he's become. It was a few days later that we heard from George again, and he told us his trial was in 2 months. He sounded so scared, but part of me thought that this is what he needed to learn consequences, though I felt disgusted at my thoughts since he's still my son who I raised. My husband and I decided to attend the trial even though it was in the next state. We felt we had to for our son and peace of mind. I told Susanna and Bethany and they were bewildered, declining to attend. At the trial, George was found guilty of all counts, including criminal damage, robbery, and failure to pay child support. The judge gave him 6 years with no plea deal due to evidence. I didn't know how to feel. My grandkids won't see their dad for 6 years. It's been 4 months and I'm still confused. George calls daily, crying, apologizing, begging us to get him out and to speak to his kids, which I've declined since Susanna hasn't given permission. Bethany decided no contact with him or her son. I haven't reached out to his other girlfriend either, so unsure how to feel. This was depressing, but I'm glad I updated. Thank you for reading. This is probably my last post. I hope we can recover and heal from this. One final comment says, as a mum, although we raise them, we are not responsible for their actions as adults. We may be part of why certain emotional or mental tendencies exist, but they are the ones that make the choices about what they're going to do in their lives and what repercussions they will be responsible for. I just read through all 3 of your posts, and please stop beating yourself up. He needs to face the reality of the mess he created, all on his own. Okay, so the women who slept with him without protection have a hand in the baby creation. The rest of it, including the jail time, is all the result of choices and actions that only he owns. Opie replies, I really needed to hear that. It's just that when your son becomes a felon, people tend to blame their upbringing. I can't help but think what I could have done differently. Yeah, naturally, but like that comment said, he is the creator of his own consequences. What about you guys? I'd love to hear your thoughts about that story. Let me know down below. Anyway, that's it from me today. I hope you guys enjoyed those stories. Thanks for making it to the end, and I'll see you all in the next video. Have a good day. Cheers.